I don't know about you, but so many people that I talk to in relation to the business journey is that going into business for yourself is the biggest personal development experience you're ever going to have. And I look back on my own years in business and realize just how deeply true that is. No matter who you are, you need to grow, you need to overcome fears, you need to change your belief systems if you really want to continue into business and continue to succeed in business. And I reflect on this, and a lot of the work that we do, Nick, with our clients is around helping them understand, well, you know, as part of that understanding ourselves, as part of that reflection and self-awareness, it's really looking deeply at what drives our human behavior. What is it that why do we do what we do? And why do we avoid and put off and procrastinate the things that we know we should do? And I know we talk about not using the word should, but you know, it's those things that you go, I really need to get around to doing those emails, for example, or my accounts, for example, or making phone calls, for example, all the things that you just, for some reason, you continually avoid it. And sometimes you can't put your finger on it because you don't understand what that pull away from it, that activity is. Or on the flip of that, you can spend all day doing something that you just find easy, that comes naturally to you, and leave everything else behind. So I thought today we might tap into this world of extended DISC or DISC profiling that we love doing with our clients. And look, pretty much anyone, my whole family is DISC profiled. So, but I just thought it would be really cool for us to talk through what that looks like so that people can start to understand. And even if you have your own behavioral profile report, no matter what the report is, because there's many personality profiles and behavioral profiles out there, but just to understand, how does that play out and how does that apply? So what does that sound good to you, Nick? Do you think that's a good way to go?
I think that sounds, oh, I almost swore, really good. That's the PG version. I think it sounds excellent. And it really is a critical component of business success as a leader. It's interesting what you said there around the different types of profiles as well, because there are so many out there. And I think what an important point to make around all this is that the profile, whatever tool it is, gives you some insights and information. It's how you interpret, how you take that information and what you do with it. Because I know there's different camps of people who, you know, like, that isn't great, this one is great, etc. But it's actually, what's that information giving you and how are you using it? So be really open-minded about that.
Absolutely. And I probably would add to that, because this does come up a lot with especially groups of people. Some people are really resistant around this kind of tool because they go, I don't like being put in a box. And nobody likes being put in a box. And this is not us saying whatever your profile is your identity. It is really just a predictor of your behavior. And that's how I like to look at it. And why I love DISC is because it's a behavioral profile. So what I find, like many, many years ago, I did, some people have heard of MBTI, Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. So it's where you get ISTJ or ENFP. If that's a foreign language to you, don't stress. But that's a personality profile. And so sometimes people say, look, I'm an introvert, so I can't do public speaking. And you go, well, you can actually technically talk in front of a group of people. Like, it's not something you can't do. You just don't have a preference for it. And so this is where I prefer with leaders and teams to use behavioral profiling such as this. So what is it? Let's unpack that a little bit. There's basically 4 different styles, and we tend to have a captain energy, and it's an energy-based thing, and then a secondary. So what do I mean by that? Well, the first one is D, which stands for dominant, but the word doesn't really matter because D effectively means somebody who is future-focused, big picture thinker, and could be considered to be very direct and outcome driven. So they are probably the strongest personality type the behavioral type out of all of them. They have an attitude of just do it, just get in, get it done, move on, let's go quickly. And then the next style that we talk about is I. I stands for influencer. I like to think of the I as the joker or the entertainer. So when you're at a party, they're the people telling the best stories, and everybody's drawn to them because they have a way with words. They're quite extroverted. They love people. They love being around other people, are energized by that. But they're also big picture thinkers, and they can see the possibilities in things, and they really see the possibilities in people. But that also means that sometimes they can be off in a different direction at different times. It's sort of like that shiny bright light syndrome. It's like, this looks great and this looks like fun, so let's go over in this direction. So that's amazing. And then there is S, which is stabilizer, and we start to sort of slow down a bit around here. The energy is a bit softer. It's more the mother nurturer style, very reliable, all about bringing people together. Very good at remembering things about people, and being that sort of, it's almost like when somebody new comes aboard, they take them under their wing and they're happy to mentor them and show them around and help them integrate into the workplace. And the final one is C, which is, what does C stand for? I can't even remember. Compliant, I think.
Yeah. Or conscientiousness.
Again, conscientious. The actual word doesn't matter. It's more the style of it. And that's more like the professor or the tech head. They're very detailed, exact, much more introverted than any of the other styles, in that they prefer to work on their own. They love being the expert at things. They love the detail, and love being able to analyze and look at facts and figures and all of that kind of thing. And I think the important thing is to remember that you're a mix. So of course people are different, but you can predict some of their behavior based on that. And one of the things that's really interesting as we've gone into business together is that we cover all four of that profile. So, and I think it would be a great starting point, Nikki, to just talk about how we notice that playing out in our business and the roles we take on. And yeah, let's start there. So talk about what your profile is and how that plays out.
Yes, and I wonder, those people that are listening that know us, I wonder if you can guess where we sit in each of these quadrants. So my natural style is very much in the I and the D, with just a tiny little splash of the S. So more so the ID, and you'll unveil yours, Ness.
Oh, so I'm the flip opposite. I'm the SC with a splash of I.
Yes. And I think what's super interesting, I mean, we've been doing this for a while. We have been, running individual and team group unpacks and individual unpacks, and really have thrown ourselves into this world of understanding this particular behavioral profile tool. And it really came to light even more, as you said, when we work together, because we work together so closely. And for those of you that are listening who maybe don't have a business partner but have a team, the examples are so relevant. And it works. Well, it works really well. We'll say that first. I love this exploration and unpacking of the genius zone. Like, I like to look at it. What's the genius? What's the gift in these profile styles? And then also there's a bad rap for each as well, which is when we flick into a bit of unresourceful behavior, or it might be that we're not flicking into unresourceful behavior, but the opposite spectrum, the opposite side, maybe is feeling a bit sensitive or a little bit tired or under pressure. And so they're perceiving it as being something that's maybe too direct. And like, as an example, I know I'm kind of digressing, but we'll come back to your question, I promise.
Is this high energy?
I wonder what type of
right now.
Yeah, but it's also important, isn't it? And that's right, because I'm going on about 3 different tangents now. So I'm going to bring it back. I just want to close the loop of what I was just talking about, the example. Like, if you've got somebody that's a high D, Ness said that can be the most intense of all the energies. Resourcefully, they're assertive and outcome driven, but they can come across as aggressive or even mean or even a bully. But it might just be that they're assertive. And the opposite, an S energy might be feeling they're the calm, the graceful, the nurturer, like Ness said. And if they're feeling a little bit, again, tired or under pressure and not quite their 100% resourceful self, they might feel like the D energy is being aggressive, but they're actually just being assertive. And then, of course, there's times where they might be being aggressive and vice versa. So it is such a complex it can be, you can go down the rabbit hole with it. But one of the things I also love about DISC is that we can really simplify it. Now I'll come back to answering your question. And I think the first thing that comes to mind when I think about our complementary styles and energies is the day, and I feel like you'll know exactly what I'm about to say here, the day where we were fairly new into the business and we kind of had this really good conversation. We sort of were bringing our own feelings, I suppose, to the conversation. And it was that I was feeling a little bit bad because I felt like I was doing all the fun work. So I was working on the website, I was creating sales pages, I was doing collateral, I was, the stuff that, like, I was in Canva and in WordPress and I loved it and it was so good. And Ness, how were you feeling?
Well, I felt like I had the easy work because I was doing all the behind the scenes, like the more detailed work, the actually figuring out the sales page or whatever it is, as opposed to creating the content that goes in it. I'm in behind the scenes working out how to do that, or looking at the finances, or, that kind of detailed process. That meant that it was just so easy to me. And I felt guilty because I thought, oh, Nikki's like having to do the really hard work of coming up with all this creative stuff, which I find challenging.
And so when we had this conversation, we were like, hang on a second. I am so grateful that you were doing that easy, inverted commas, because that ain't easy to me. Like, for me to do the work that you're doing, that analytical thinking, the active campaign behind the scenes, the zappy things, whatever, like, I could do it. And I think this is an important point. I could do it, absolutely, if I had to, but it would take more energy, it would take more effort, it would take more focus, because that's not my natural place. And then to be thinking, that the opposite, like to realize that you were feeling guilty about that and I'm feeling bad about this, we realized, hang on a second, this is the genius. This is allowing ourselves to really step into that place. And it's not about letting ourselves off the hook, sorry. We still need to lean in. Like, I still need to lean into the finances, for example, but that is not my core genius zone and I don't love it. Whereas I also remember talking to you one day and you're like, I've just had the best day ever. I was in spreadsheets all day and it was so good because I had the space to do it. And I was like, wow, that is literally sounds like a nightmare to me. That is not a fun day, a good day, but how beautiful. Just even half an hour ago, I flicked a form off to you and I was like, oh, I feel bad. I should embrace this more and do it. But you're like, no, send it to me. It's easy. It's done. And this is that embracing of our natural styles without shirking the responsibility as business owners and leaders to stretch into other areas, but also stepping into that genius zone and working together around that.
Absolutely. Because I think, I know that I could step out of the business and you could do that. And this is why I come back to this whole thing. It's a behavior. It's an energy thing. Yes, if you had to sit there and do spreadsheets for a whole day, that would drain your energy, but it's possible and you can do it. And it's a bit like me. I love facilitating large groups and, that's high energy, which I can tap into, but it taps me out. And so for me to have a whole, back to back of that, I know that I just don't have the energy to show up every day doing that. Whereas a high I energy may find that that's actually easy work. And I find the one-on-one work easy. So I can have 5 coaching sessions in a day and be energized because they're one-on-one, as opposed to doing a whole group thing. So I guess what I'm getting at here is when you understand your style, what comes naturally to you, and you start leaning into the strengths of that rather than focusing on all the things I have to get right and try to figure out and, having to do it all, you start to look at other opportunities around, well, could there be other people I could outsource that to? So for you, Nick, you might have chosen to outsource in your previous business to a bookkeeper because although you could do it, it doesn't make sense. And so I might outsource to a copywriter because although I could do it, it takes me a long time to sort of get that into that space. And this is where it can play out in business. And I think what's important to remember, and it comes back to what I said at the beginning about not putting ourselves in a box, that we don't have a belief that only one style is best, that we have to have, you have to be a D to be in business. That actually was a belief I had when I started. And it probably was influenced by a couple of mentors I had back at the time who perhaps were D energies. And I looked at them and I saw their success, and I was like, I'm an SC. I'm going to fail in business because I don't have that big picture. I'm not direct. I don't have those qualities that come naturally to me. And I probably spent the first couple of years of business really leaning into that and having sweaty armpits, but saying stuff that I would not normally say, and being direct about things. And then I kind of got to a point that was great, but it wasn't what makes me great at what I do. And it wasn't until I embraced this sort of mother nurturer energy, the connector, the person who loves to build long-term relationships. I'm really great at remembering things about people and about, that continuing that bond and connection and helping people feel special. And I realized over time that actually was my superpower. Yes, I can lean into the other areas that aren't so much, but really embracing those qualities that come naturally to you. They don't feel forced. It doesn't feel like you're putting it on and trying to be someone that you're not. So I really, that was a huge lesson that I learned in my business through understanding the disc profiling and through better understanding me and leaning into that strength. So I wonder for you, Nick, have you had something similar where you have noticed something in yourself that has become your superpower?
Definitely. And I also just want to, before I answer that question once again, I want to really reflect on what you've just said there, because what I'm hearing in that is it's not about changing who you are. It's about not trying to fit into, for, the analogy, a different box. And so this example that you shared, it was actually about embracing that beautiful nurturing energy and then knowing when to stretch into the other energies when needed. I think that's such an important message. And I think that that's something to really highlight, because, oftentimes the conversation is, I want to be authentic. I want to be me. I want to, I don't want to have to change. And we do not want you to change. We want you to step into the genius, the beauty of who you are naturally, and then stretch into other areas, but come back to that. So I think that's a really lovely example. And we've certainly seen that play out in our clients as well. There's a client that we were reflecting on and chatting about who's actually very similar profile to me, although actually no, the IS. So very, very much about people, the fun, it's all about enjoying the experience along the way. But there was a preconceived belief, similar, I have to bring the D as a leader in my business. Yes, there are times that has to happen. However, when she embraced the fact that she could bring her I energy, A, it became a bit easier. B, the team enjoyed being around her. The engagement increases, and you still are being responsible, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know. I just think that there's a profile, and I wonder, this whole way of doing business, and when we think about hustle culture and how we've been taught to do business in the past, which no offense to men out there, but realistically the models that we've seen, the models of excellence, models of business, have been that very masculine way of doing business, not just the hustle. Yeah.
The interesting thing in that client that you're talking about, the example, she had a male business coach. Love men, not bashing men here, but he was telling her how she should do business.
Yes.
You need to be tougher with your team. You need to be more direct. You need to show them who the boss is. And that was her, like, she was paying this guy to mentor her around how she could improve her business. And this is where this really gets us on a soapbox, because we truly look, my voice is even going, I'm so passionate about this. But we really believe that it is not about trying to fit a box that you don't, like, become somebody you're not. It's not hustle. It's not be direct, be mean, be whatever. And for her, you're right, it was still be responsible, but Jesus, have some fun at work. And if that's what's core, and for her, it was at her core, it was the connection to people. It was a bit of fun and adventure along the way. And once she started to embrace that, things got easier. She enjoyed it more, and her team, as you said, engaged more, because she was being, and I know it's an overused term, but she was being authentically her. as opposed to this version, the cookie cutter, which I believed at the beginning of my first business that that's what I needed too. You've got to be tough and you've got to be direct, and it's just such a lie that we tell ourselves.
What also comes to mind around this is that there were two things you said, words that kind of piqued my mind. How you should, as soon as somebody is telling you how you should do business, the coach was saying you should do it like this, your experience, immediately there are alarm bells around that. Yeah. So take a moment, listeners, and reflect on that. The second thing is, you need to be tougher. So what comes to mind there is that if you don't have the right structures in business, if you don't have good operating rhythms, if you don't have clarity of expectations, if you don't have position descriptions, if you don't have goals, if you don't have KPIs, these are all things that you must have in the business. And they do fit into, if we were to put DISC over different elements of business, they fall into that D, that DI. But when you have that structure in place, then you're guiding the business along those structures that gives you the flexibility and freedom to bring, say, the I or the S or the C or whatever it might be. So if you're kind of thinking, because I don't want anyone to walk away going, oh, cool, well, I can just, it's all about fun and experience and that's it. That's not what we're saying, because you've got to have your baseline operating rhythms and structure in business in place. And then that gives you the freedom to not have to be so tough on the team because it's in the structure. Does that make sense, Ness?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that again is an opportunity to lean into where strengths exist in your team, or if you don't have that in your business, who out there can you tap into as a resource who can perhaps that more C work around the attention to detail and the process and the checklist, how can you make sure that as part of setting it up, it doesn't become something that's avoided because it feels painful for you to have to do that. It's really looking into what are the easier processes to make that happen, like talking into a voice note or recording a video rather than sitting there and writing out step by step. So there's so many different ways we play into those strengths. But I'm going to loop us back around to the question.
I just got to say one more thing.
You've got to say one more thing.
I've got to say one thing. So really what we're saying here is that there's elements in business. It's not about avoiding that's not my natural, so I'll avoid it. You still have to have that in place for business. That's my D coming out as well, going, hang on, but it is about results and outcomes and blah, blah, blah. So that's important, but also consider your team are going to be a mix of people. So that's good because you can leverage their strengths, like Ness said, but also that's where that adaptability and that being a chameleon can come into play. If it's too serious, some people won't feel engaged. If it's too fun, some people won't feel engaged. So anyway, that's we could maybe revisit this in a couple of months to build on DISC for teams a little bit further. So loop me back. I do have another example as well. So being in sales, my eyes go, I feel like you've given me permission to just...
Yeah, of course.
I am aware of time, but sales. So I have been asked so many times, I've been on panels, with this question. This is probably one of the most common questions I get asked as a sales coach with my sales coach hat on. And it's around, are you born a good salesperson or can you learn it? And my mind goes to DISC because there are some people that are naturally more dominant, entertaining, the charming, etc. They want to go out and have conversations like you said. But I'm telling you right now, anybody can be a great salesperson. Just like you said, anybody can have a business. And when I say that, there's a caveat. And the caveat is you have to want to do it, because it might not be as easy for you to pick up the phone and have a conversation. It might not be as easy for you to, like in my instance, my mind goes to the data, the numbers, the reporting. I remember I used to, when I had a senior leadership role and Thursdays was reporting day, I would wear my Connies and jeans because if I was comfortable in what I was physically dressed, somehow my brain could handle a bit more data analysis. There's these little strategies that we do. So whatever the role is, you absolutely can lean in and be freaking amazing at it, but you have to want it. This is the will piece, because it's not going to naturally be the easiest thing that you'll be able to do.
Totally. I love that. Now, do you want to answer the question?
Yeah, what was the question again? I can't even remember.
So this is, again, how this plays out in our business. It's hilarious. The question
is actually what it's like behind the scenes.
Absolutely. It's about, what were your realizations in business when it came to embracing that style And you might have already answered it, I think, in some of the examples that you've given. But yeah, that's what the original question.
Yeah. So look, I feel like I was sort of answering that question in different versions of that question. But I think for me, it was embracing the fact, like you're right, I absolutely have outsourced my booking, the whole bookkeeping for immediately as soon as I started my business, because I knew that wasn't a strength. Yeah. But again, it's equally that responsibility of going, I need to know what I need to know about numbers. Yeah. And I also can outsource. I don't need to be bogged down in the detail. I think another realization for me was that it's okay to bring the I wonder if, and from what we've seen and experienced, there can be a real, like, putting ourselves down, and sometimes around our natural style. Like for me, that big energy, that I like learning to put myself in a box because it's too much. Yes, I have to adapt to different environments. I'm a little bit more unleashed in this podcast than maybe some others, etc. But actually what I realized is that's why people wanted to work with me. And interestingly, in my first business, I actually attracted a lot of C-type clients in IT and accounting. And I was like, whoa, that's like the opposite of me. This is interesting. And I really learned that there's a reason. Yep. It's the same for you all listening. It's the same for you, Ness, when you tapped into that connector and that natural side. So it's about embracing, just like you said, who we are and realizing the genius and the gift in that, and being able to share that. That's probably my biggest realization.
Absolutely. And I think that, that's where we start to look at how we can be really connected to some clients and really able to offer the service that we offer and do it well, because we're something that's missing in their world. We're solving the problem that they can't solve for themselves. And I think that, when I look at it from the perspective of leaders and trying to understand their teams, because let's face it, as soon as you engage, even if it's a contractor to come in and work with you, we're dealing with human behavior, and humans are complex. So this is one area that we can tap into where we can help understand others and communicate better. But there's so many other things going on at a personal level. So being able to pick one tool out and be able to understand how people respond in different situations, I think is really valuable. And looking at it from the perspective of having that curiosity about what's driving behavior. Because when you go deeper into profiling tools like DISC, to the level that, we sort of understand it and work with our clients on, it really, even the dysfunctional behavior or the unresourceful behavior, there's reasons that are driving that are quite unique to the fear base or what's important to that particular style. So there's so many layers on here in relation to doing any kind of profiling. But I think the message that I really want our listeners and viewers to lean into today is taking the time to actually understand what makes you tick. Who are you at your core? And there's so many opportunities to be there because, and this is what you talked about earlier, Nikki, if we don't understand us and understand our strengths and find ways to utilize that and really leaning into that, we can get caught in the trap of how we should be doing things. That's the cycle we need to break. Stop being in business how you think you should be, or listening to people who are going to tell you to be different to who you are. So sometimes you have to do different things and focus on different areas and tap into different behaviors. But really this whole getting out of your own way and stop listening to bad advice. And I think that's where people can get caught into, I'm not good enough because I'm this or I'm this, and I have to be more like that person. And I think that it's so different to that, because we embrace our differences, we have a laugh at them, and we embrace our own strengths. And so that's how what comes to mind when I say that?
I don't know if we've shared this story, but the classic is, particularly in our relationship, the detail. So I am not the best at things like, remembering to get receipts and the detail around those sorts of things. So Ness is constantly having to follow me up, and I really appreciate you, Ness. Although I did nail it today, didn't I? I got you that receipt so quickly. Yeah. But the verb is what comes up. So when we were together in Sydney and we had, we were celebrating and we were in person, and just the conversation, just that dynamic around, should we have cocktails or should we be, a bit more splurge or a bit more sensible. But then people, we went to the Opera House bar or something, and you could see the Opera House bar. And I swear Ness gave me a little wink or something, because I was like, I'm in charge right now of actually going to the bar and getting whatever I want. So of course I came back with a bottle of Verve, and it was beautiful. And it was lovely, but would Ness have made the same decision if she went to the bar? No, she's saying no. It was so worth it. But this is just such a classic. We always joke about that, right?
Yeah, that's right. That was a fun memory. And yes, I mean, like putting you in, giving you the credit card and saying head to the bar and buy some champagne. What was I thinking?
Exactly.
But you have tapped on, and I know we're going to wrap up in a minute, but these are all the different ways that it plays out, right? And understanding ourselves. Because I remember when we were doing money coaching, Nikki, one of the problems that you were challenged by were keeping a budget and fitting into that spreadsheet kind of lifestyle mentality. And I'm not good with money because I don't do I don't have the spreadsheet to be able to work out where money goes, or whatever it was, whatever the stories you were telling yourself. But then what we did together was really lean into that I energy and bring some D energy into it, which is where the figures became important. So this is applicable in business as well. You didn't necessarily have to go into the level of detail that I do when it comes to finances, but where you clicked the D energy, that sort of a D, am I explaining this right? That they like the big picture, like the overview, the project management almost of it. They want to know where everything is at. They don't want to do the detail of it, but it's really important to understand what the figures are telling, the story or the message the figures are saying. And then the I energy, where we do money dates completely differently. So I'm very structured in my money date, love to be on my own and sort of like have that space. You love going out with Jules, having lunch, something extravagant, and having the big picture discussions, and also, finding your way of doing spreadsheets. So
yeah, I think that's such a great example, and it's so true. And actually that's something, as you know, that I've been working on over the years. Dashboard is what comes to mind. Give me the high level, the important numbers, and absolutely find the story behind it, versus that level of detail, which then I could fall asleep over, but it's still important to know. Yeah. And you really, what you said, really, there was so much that you said that resonated, just really understanding, how do I make this meaningful and interesting for me? Which doesn't have to be, and I want everyone to really hear this, doesn't have to be the same for everybody. And what comes to mind there also is things like, we've got in business, I believe we have to have revenue targets. We have to know how we're tracking. We need to know there's certain numbers in business we need to know. Now, if you're not naturally driven by numbers and targets, that's okay. You still set the target, but then tap in. What does that target actually mean to me? So, for a C, it might be ticking a box. It might be achieving something. And KPIs often for C energies, it could be, yep, I feel good because I'm ticking those boxes. For the I or for the S, change what that means. So a revenue target, have it, but then how many customers does that mean? And looking at customers, how many people am I going to help? So your revenue target all of a sudden, and I feel like S energy, Ness, you're nodding along, would get much more motivated and excited by, I'm going to help 50 people over the next 6 months versus whatever the number is, versus I'm going to hit X amount of revenue. Like, whereas for a D, but I'm hitting that target.
Yeah.
And for the I, it might be about, that means that I'm going to be able to get, when we hit that, 2 bottles of Verve, one to have with my business partner and one to have with my wife. Think about, how do you make these goals meaningful for you? And you don't have to remember, was that a C, I, S, D? You'll know what it is because of how you have felt when we've touched on these different areas. Amazing. So I feel like I've got a cool action based on that.
Love it. Let's go for it.
An actionable action. I would love for you to check in with your revenue targets, check in with your goals if you don't have any.
Set them.
Set them. It's about time. Set them. We also have loads of free resources and tools around that. Feel free to reach out to us. So look at your target, and does it actually excite you, motivate you? How do you feel when you look at it? If you're like icky, yuck, avoiding, maybe it's too much of a D energy in that. Then think, like I just said, if you put number of people that you're helping, or what's the reward that you get once you've achieved it, and do you have like a checklist of how you're going to get there? Like, really lean into this place so that you're making it meaningful and that target is meaningful for you. Otherwise, we've both been in businesses where we set targets that didn't mean anything, and it was actually demotivating or avoided, right? And a lot of business owners do that. So I feel like that's a good action.
I love it.
In the next 24 hours. Look at your
That's right.
Look at your targets.
And I would add to that if you're sitting here going, oh, I want to find out more, we live it and breathe it and we love it so much. So if you are curious to find out more about doing your own profile, please do reach out. You can contact us on LinkedIn. That's our favorite platform of social media, or you can email or pick up the phone, give us a call. But it has been amazing, old school, talking today, and we trust that you have gained something really valuable from this conversation, or at least started getting you thinking. Have a great week, everyone.
See you later.